Hello, everyone, and welcome to For Head's Sake, the weekly webcast and podcast of the National Headache Foundation. I'm Dr. Lindsay Weitzel, founder of Migraine Nation and chronic daily migraine survivor. I'm super excited to be here today with Julienne Verdi. She's the executive director of the Alliance for Headache Disorders Advocacy. She's also an attorney, a mother of 4 children, and just does so much stuff for our community. She is uniquely fit for work that she does, and I'll let her go into that. We are here today to discuss Headache on the Hill 2023. What is it? What have they accomplished in the past? And how can we get involved? And what are the plans for 2023? So thank you so much for being with us here today, Julienne. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
So can you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your health background and why you are so involved in advocacy?
Absolutely. So a little bit about my health background. In my teenage years, I started experiencing significant pain in my sacroiliac joints and other joints like my hands and my feet. And then also started experiencing pretty severe headaches. My head pain would be so extreme that I'd end up the only thing I could do was be in complete darkness. And I'd just spend hours with a blanket over my head, sobbing for the pain to stop. It's such a vivid memory that I have from those years. And because I was so young, it took a long time for doctors to really take my pain seriously. I was later diagnosed with both ankylosing spondylitis, which is a chronic inflammatory disease, as well as migraine with aura. When it came to migraine, part of why I think it took so long to get the medical help I needed was because both my parents had significant issues with head pain growing up. And it was just kind of normalized in my family. I thought, honestly, that everybody got headaches like me. And so I just had to learn to live with it. I still have a headache almost every day of my life. And up until I got proper medical treatment, I was self-medicating so much with over-the-counter pain medication that I ended up giving myself multiple stomach ulcers. Okay. Yeah, it was awful. Yeah. And it lasted, it was years before I really got the help I needed. It was finally in law school that I thought I was having seizures from the aura that I would get right before a migraine attack, that, I finally, had all these tests done and finally was diagnosed with migraine and understood what was happening to my own body. And now that I'm in this headache world as executive director of the Alliance for Headache Disorders Advocacy, one of the things that I've been really struck by is that my story isn't all that uncommon. Despite the prevalence of migraine and other headache disorders, their significance and burden is really downplayed. And there is so much stigma that so many headache patients are suffering alone and in silence. And I joined AHDA about a year ago. And what I love about this work is getting to use my advocacy background to move the needle to make life better for the millions of Americans experiencing migraine and headache disorders. The last thing I'll say on this is federal policy really, it impacts the daily life of headache patients, whether it be getting accommodations in the workplace or at school, access to a certified headache specialist, prior authorization for insurance purposes, for medication or other treatment options, other related, insurance issues, or the ability, or actually maybe I should say the inability for people with headache disorders to qualify for Social Security benefits.
Right.
So that's what we do as AHDA. We're an organization that brings together headache patients, providers, researchers, caregivers, and other organizations like the National Headache Foundation, who we're just so happy to have as a part of our organization, to use the collective power of advocacy and the power of, just really speaking truth to power, I would say, to fight for equitable policies for all those impacted by headache disorders in this country.
That is so well said. I love everything you said. Some of it gave me chills. I think that everyone's going to love to hear everything you have to say in our episode today. And I can say I very much relate to what you said about headache being normalized and migraine being normalized in your family, because I had chronic migraine from the time I was 4. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 17. It was the norm in my family too. And so I can understand that. And I remember I met someone, my sister had a friend over one day who said she'd never had a headache. And I thought there was something wrong with her. And so I can totally understand that. I was appalled. So, so thank you for that. That was so well said and so awesome. So taking part in Headache on the Hill, honestly, is one of the highlights of my year when it comes to headache advocacy. So I'm really excited to let everyone know, both people who have been regularly and people who maybe have not gone yet and are considering applying. We are talking to everyone in this particular episode. I'm always so impressed, maybe even a little shocked by the amount of organization and work that goes into this event. Can you tell us a little bit about its history?
First of all, I'm just so glad to hear that your experience at Headache on the Hill has been so positive. It's so great to hear. And thank you also for acknowledging all the work that goes into Headache on the Hill. So for those who may not be aware, Headache on the Hill, or HOH as we like to call it, is our annual advocacy day where, again, we bring patients, caregivers, medical providers, researchers, and other organizations working in this space. We bring them together to advocate for policies that impact the lives of headache disorder patients and providers. It's certainly a labor of love and our Herculean feat to pull this off every year, and we're really proud of it. This February will mark our 16th annual Headache on the Hill. And up until recent years, it's really been a volunteer run and organized event. So it's, when I joined HDA, I was shocked at just kind of what has been able to be accomplished over the last 15 years at the time. It was, it's an amazing feat. Mm-hmm. And I'm so excited about the future of it because we're able to really, I think we're able to grow at this point, and we're excited about what the future of Headache on the Hill is going to look like over the next few years.
Right. So can you let people know what some of the wins, I would call them wins, are that have been accomplished by Headache on the Hill from previous years? Now, when I say that, a lot of this work, for example, what we do this year, we might not see an immediate win. It might be years from now that the win happens, but we've had some significant wins, I believe, from Headache on the Hill. Can you tell us about a couple of them?
Yeah, so I'll talk about one in particular that I think that we're really proud of. We've had a lot, as you've alluded to, but one that I think we're particularly proud of has to do with the establishment of Headache Disorders Centers of Excellence. It's a little bit of a mouthful within the Veterans Health Administration, or the VA. I'm sure many of your listeners are aware our veterans have really unique health needs, especially after kind of service in the post 9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, whether it be due to traumatic brain injuries or exposure to toxic burn pits. Our veterans have a much higher prevalence of headache disorders than the civilian population. And what's so great about these centers of excellence that we advocated for over several years, and have the amount of them have actually increased over the last few years because of this continued advocacy. Because, like you said, often these asks are not a one-year ask, right? It's something that we build up to, and then we continue, because progress shouldn't just end. We can continue to move the needle forward. Mm-hmm. But what's so great about these centers that have expanded over the last few years is that they not only provide specialized and high quality healthcare to military veterans, there's also important components of provider training done at these centers, as well as research. Mm-hmm. And I will say here, and one thing that I do want to bring up, because it's been timely, is that there's more work to do in this specific area as well, even though we're really proud of the wins. Just this year, you've probably seen in the news around the PACT Act, which got a lot of attention this year, and we're really thrilled to see it pass. There was 23 toxic exposure related conditions. So this has to do with those toxic burn pits that were added to the Veterans the VA's list of service presumptions to qualify for care and benefits. And unfortunately, despite our advocacy on this, and despite the prevalence and burden for headache disorder for post 9/11 veterans who are exposed to burn pits, headache disorders were not included in the PACT Act.
Right.
And why we think it's possible that it had to do with the idea that it's so prevalent that the cost associated with treating them would be so high that it would be that's why they didn't want to do it, right? So we think that may have something to do with it, but it's a real tragedy, and it's something that needs to be addressed in this country. And even with the increase of headache disorder centers of excellence, the centers don't have adequate resources to care for all of the veterans who are experiencing burn pit related headache disorders. So it's something that we are going to be continuing to advocate for, because we believe, regardless of cost, we can't abandon our veterans when they need us the most.
Right. Okay. So that is one of the awesome wins. It's just an example of the things that we advocate for each year at Headache on the Hill that has made a difference. So thank you for elucidating that, and then showing us how much more work has to be done even in just that one area. So for those of us that do want to be involved in Headache on the Hill 2023, what is the deadline to apply, and how do we apply? Where do we go?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. So those interested in applying to join our 2023 cohort of Headache on the Hill advocates should go to our website, which is allianceforheadacheadvocacy.org. And you can go to the Take Action section of that website, and you'll find the link there to the application. Applications are due by November 30th. We do encourage you to get your application in as soon as possible, though, because we are reviewing them on a rolling basis. And the one thing I just want to point out is that we provide training for all of our advocates related to advocacy. So you don't need to have any advocacy experience to apply. So if you don't have advocacy experience, don't think that you're not worthy or welcome to apply. We want you to apply.
Right. And you don't have to be a political genius. That was one of the things I was worried about. Do I know enough about politics? They teach you, they train us once we're in the process. So so if you feel that you would be good at this, and you want to speak to our representatives, definitely go apply. So we used to all go to DC, right? But pre-COVID, and then we sort of went virtual. So is Headache on the Hill 2023 virtual or in person?
Headache on the Hill will be virtual again this year. It's going to be taking place on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023. There will be a small group that will go to DC for in-person meetings. And so you'll see on the application some questions to, would you be interested in coming in person? But the vast majority of people will be virtual, and those in-person decisions will be made kind of once we see who, we have our finalized asks, and we know what representatives are serving on certain committees. We might want to give them a special touch by coming in person. And so then we might reach out to advocates from a specific area to ask them to join us. And I'll just say, while we miss having everybody together in person, and we wish we could, we've also had a lot of success with our virtual meetings over the last few years. And I know, like, for myself, I was virtual with everybody else last year. And one of the benefits of that was I had a migraine attack in the middle of Headache on the Hill. And so I was able to rest, take my medication, and, take care of myself in the middle of the day. I think for a lot of us, those virtual meetings are a little bit more accessible, even though it is still a lot sitting in front of your computer all day. It's a different experience than having to kind of run around and run from meeting to meeting in the different offices. The only other thing that I'll say is that we're also seeing that congressional offices are still mostly preferring those virtual meetings as well, because they're more effective. You can meet with more people.
Right.
So we'll be, long story short, we'll be virtual again this year.
Okay. So how many, just so that people who haven't been there can get a feel, how many people are usually involved in Headache on the Hill?
So last year we had a total of 48 states represented, and we had over 200 participants. So together we had met with just about half of all congressional offices. And our goal for this year is to build on last year's success and increase those numbers. I would personally love to get to 50 states this year. It's my own personal pet project for the year. And we're also really committed to increasing the diversity and representation of our advocates this year to make sure that they better reflect the full spectrum of people impacted by headache disorders, and especially those communities who are disproportionately impacted by headache disorders or have disparities in healthcare treatment and outcomes. So that's something that we're very committed to this year.
Okay. Is there anything in particular you are looking for in Headache on the Hill applicants?
Yeah, so like I said before, we're not looking for you to have coming here with a ton of advocacy experience. That's great, but that's not the main thing that we look for in an applicant. I think the main thing that we really look for is for passionate people who have a story to tell, whether it be from the perspective of a healthcare provider or a patient or a caregiver. There's real power in storytelling. Statistics are great. We know that stats are on our side on these issues. We know the extreme burden of healthcare, of headache disorders in this country, but that's not been enough to move the needle. But what can move the needle when you're in a meeting with a legislator or their staff and you have a person with a real face that they can latch onto and who can tell their story about how their life has been impacted, there's an immense power in that, and speaking truth to power and having just a regular person just explain what this really means to actual people. And it has changed hearts and minds, and it can make a difference. So that's really what we're looking for.
Right. And so for people who are going to go apply now online, and it is an application process, what are reasons that perhaps not everyone would be able to participate?
It's a good question. And, we would absolutely love to accept everyone who applies, but that may not be possible. And part of that is because meetings with legislative offices are typically pretty short. So, maybe you have 15, 20 minutes with that legislator or their staff, that you have their full attention. And we want to really make sure that every advocate who participates can be an active participant and not be kind of sitting in the background, that you get to speak, that you get to tell your story or explain the ask. And so we have to limit the amount of people that are in those meetings. So let's say you live in New Jersey's 1st congressional district, and by some miracle, we have 30 people apply from that district. That would be too big for one meeting. So we have to make some difficult decisions and whittle down that congressional district to make sure that that meeting in particular is not massive. So, and that everybody gets a chance to speak. So realistically, this won't be a problem for the majority of cases, but so don't let it deter you from applying. And if we can't accept you this year, we'll find a way for you to participate in other ways throughout the year.
Great. Okay, so now let's get to the nitty-gritty. This is what I really want to know, and I think everyone else really wants to know. Each year, there are very specific goals for Headache on the Hill. We call them asks, and we learn them through the training process. Are the asks for 2023 elucidated yet? Do you know what the goals are?
So we're still in the process of finalizing our asks, but I can give you kind of some hints about what we're looking at and what we're thinking about. And one of the issues that we will absolutely be talking about this year is long COVID. Long COVID related headaches and exacerbation of symptoms for existing headache patients is something that is a real issue that we believe has to be addressed and isn't getting the funding and attention currently that this issue deserves. So long COVID is something that we will definitely be addressing in this year's Headache on the Hill. We'll also be advocating for the creation of a headache caucus, which is something that we're really excited about. We'll be asking our members of Congress to join that caucus, which is a signal and a commitment to lead and support headache policy in years to come. So those are two things that you'll likely be seeing at Headache on the Hill. There may be another one that will be a surprise if it comes through. So fingers crossed for us that we can get this ask finalized. We're really excited about the third one.
A surprise. Wow. Okay. I did not know we were going to talk about a surprise. Wow. All right. So Julienne, this is awesome. Thank you for elucidating all this for us, telling us what we need to do to apply, telling us what we might be talking about once we're there in this coming year. So Julienne, is there anything else we need to know about Headache on the Hill before we go today?
Sure. So firstly, I would just encourage your listeners to apply. So again, go to our website, which is Alliance for Headache Advocacy, and go to that Take Action section of the website and please apply. The other thing that I just wanted to say is that advocacy isn't just a powerful tool for legislative change, though, of course, that's what we're focused on at AHDA. But being an advocate is also, at least in my experience, a deeply empowering and meaningful experience on a personal level as well. Learning to be an advocate is something you can take with you into your doctor's office, your workplace, your child's school. There's also an amazing sense of camaraderie that comes out of Headache on the Hill that I think is worth highlighting. Your fellow advocates lift you up. If someone starts experiencing symptoms during a meeting, your fellow advocates are there to support you because they understand you in a way that many others in their lives probably don't. And there's this uniquely amazing euphoric feeling, at least in my experience, you get when you finish up a meeting and you feel like you've personally made a difference in making life better for other people. It's an almost indescribable feeling. I get that. And no matter how many times I've been a part of legislative advocacy, it just never gets old. And I wonder if that's something that you've experienced and felt after a Headache on the Hill meeting, Lindsay.
Without a doubt, it feels amazing. You know, you have done something to help make a difference for yourself, your family, any of your children that may also be experiencing migraine in the future, and for the entire community. And it feels great. And not only that, but advocacy is good for our health. It empowers us. It helps us feel better. And I think, and it helps us take care of ourselves and take care of each other. And I just think it's a great thing to get involved. So that's my 2 cents on the topic. So I think it's an amazing feeling.
Likewise. Thank you again, Lindsay. And I just also want to say thank you to the National Headache Foundation for having me on, supporting Headache on the Hill. And we're really excited for your participation, support, and advocacy this February.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, Julienne. And thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of For Head's Sake. Please join us again next week on the podcast and webcast of the National Headache Foundation. Bye-bye.